joining us right now as we turn our attention back to the collegiate ranks. Senior college football writer for ESPN, Sirius XM College Sports Radio, Adam Rittenberg, checking in with us here on this Thursday evening. You can hit up Adam on Twitter at ESPN Rittenberg. Adam, thanks for hanging out with us this evening. We greatly appreciate it. And I want to start with you just a little bit more macro before we dive into the games that we have slated here for Saturday in Week 12. Looking back at the college football playoff rankings from a couple nights ago, I'm curious to get your thoughts. What school do you think has the biggest gripe after the second batch of rankings from the committee?
Yeah, good to be with you. It's probably a school in the ACC. It's hard to pick one of them, but the committee just hasn't valued that conference very much here so far. And their highest-rated team is a team that's not pegged to make the conference championship right now, and that's Miami at 15. Georgia Tech only one loss, and they've been pretty impressive. They're all the way down at 16, where there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 two-loss teams ahead of them. So just not a lot of respect for the ACC. Both Virginia and Louisville fell 5 spots after their home losses last week. So BYU maybe a little bit as well. A 5-spot drop, but they were beaten pretty soundly by Texas Tech on the road. But I'd probably go with one of those ACC teams.
Adam, Brad Evans here. Thanks for joining us. I'm not giving Alabama much of a chance of stubbing their toe against the Sooners. Am I disrespecting Boomer Sooner as a result? Currently at BetMGM, the Tide are 6-point favorites. So break this one down for us. Oklahoma and Alabama.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'm actually really excited to see a game in Alabama this season. Oh, nice. I was talking with Kalen DeBoer, the head coach, yesterday, and the interesting matchup to me is whether Alabama can run the ball, because they haven't had great success this season. Oklahoma, 4th nationally in run defense, and Kalen's got a lot of respect for OU, but he feels like Alabama's close to having that breakout game. He's really challenged his team to be physical, not just the backs, but the offensive linemen, the tight ends, everybody that's involved in their blocking schemes. And this will be a really nice test for this Bama run game to see if they can get going against a talented OU defense. And then on the other side, can OU score the ball and have big plays against this Alabama defense on the road, a defense that's been playing better and better as the season's gone along. So big moment for John Mateer. Again, Oklahoma's out of the playoff race if they don't sweep these final 3 against Bama, Missouri, and LSU. But you get out of this game with a win somehow, then you're going home to face a Missouri team with a backup quarterback and an LSU team without a head coach. So it is a huge moment for Brent Venables and the Sooners.
Yeah, definitely a lot stacked and on the line there for Boomer Sooner. Adam, one of the other monster games this week, and it could be a trap of sorts for Joe Montana U. Notre Dame travels to Pittsburgh and faces a white-hot Panther squad. The current spread seems rather disrespectful with the Fighting Irish favored by 12.5 on the road. And, of course, the backdrop there with game day and everything else. So do you agree or disagree that Notre Dame rolls?
Well, I think Notre Dame can roll if they control the line of scrimmage and if Jeremiah Love can get loose, because there's nobody stopping him. He is the best open field player in the country this season. But I think Pitt's dangerous. Ever since they made the switch to Mason Heinzel at quarterback, I know that they feel really confident in him, talking to the coaches there this week. And Notre Dame, I don't know if they faced a quarterback or a passing game other than USC, and that was a game in the rain, kind of a yucky game. But a passing game quite like what they'll see from Pitt since way back in week 2 when they really struggled to stop Texas A&M. So I think Notre Dame's defense has improved throughout the course of the season, but this is a Pitt offense that, in talking to their coordinator, Cade Bell, the other day, they're not going to back down from Leonard Moore. They're going to go at Notre Dame. They believe that they can create some chunk plays in the pass game and try to keep pace with the Irish on the scoreboard. And last time Notre Dame went out on the road, it wasn't a good performance against Boston College, and so they're going to need to be sharper to take down this Pitt team. Pat Narduzzi's teams pull off these games, and they have throughout his tenure. They will not be intimidated by Notre Dame.
This is BetMGM Tonight. Femi Abebefe, Brad Evans. We're hanging out with Adam Rittenberg, senior college football writer for ESPN, Sirius XM College Sports Radio, and on Twitter at ESPN Rittenberg. You mentioned it a short while ago, LSU doesn't have a head coach. And I got to ask you about what's going on down there in Baton Rouge, because it just seems chaotic to me. just based on like the governor being involved with the board of supervisors and Scott Woodward no longer being there as the athletic director. And now Brian Kelly is suing the school, just trying to make sure he gets his buyout money. They don't want to pay the $54 million. When you talk to people around college football, whether they're coaches or media members or athletic directors, what are people saying about this LSU head coaching vacancy? Because this is a pretty coveted job given recent history and the success that they have. What are people saying about what's happening down there in Baton Rouge?
Right. Well, I think people who followed this program over the history know that these types of things come with the territory at LSU. It's a place that has, great history and has won national championships, but there's also a level of dysfunction, largely because the stadium is located 3 miles away from the state capitol. So, there's history here with the governor and the political environment around LSU football that goes back generations. It certainly has come to a head here lately with what's happened there the last few weeks. I was at the Texas A&M game, and even though that was a really rough moment, I didn't think it would get to the point it has. So I think there's still a belief that that's a great job, but it's a job you have to go into eyes wide open, realizing that you got to navigate a more difficult political environment than you do at a number of other programs. That's just life in Louisiana. And the advantage of LSU is that of the top talent producing states, Louisiana is the only one with one Power 4 program. But the curse of that is that there is an obsession with LSU football that goes beyond just the people who are in the stands every week. It is really life down there, and at times it gets very, very tangled up with some of the other entities in the state.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's absolutely bananas, but quite predictable down there in Louisiana that the governor would be involved in LSU's decision-making in the head football coaching ranks. Adam, looking ahead, assuming this plays out in the Big Ten, if Indiana and Ohio State play one another for that coveted conference title, what's your perception? What would be your handicap of that? I mean, the Hoosiers just continue to, write this destiny story, it seems like. That epic suspended animation catch to win the game against Penn State last week, I cannot get out of my head from Omar Cooper. But do you feel in a single game scenario in a neutral field that the Buckeyes would possibly serve up the Hoosiers a giant slice of humble pie?
Right. Yeah. I think it's Indiana team. The first thing to realize is that they're better than they were last year. They were a team last year that had an incredible record and did some historic things. They also really benefited from their schedule in the Big Ten. This year they played a much tougher schedule in league play. Going to Iowa, getting a win, going to Oregon, getting a win by double digits. Last week against Penn State, not an easy game, even with Penn State, in its current predicament. You look at Indiana, improvement on the offensive line. I think they were one of the semifinalists for the Joe Moore Award that came out today. They've improved significantly at quarterback. That's not a knock against Curtis Rourke, but Fernando Mendoza right now may win the Heisman Trophy. He may be the first player selected in the NFL draft in April. I think their depth on the defensive line is improved from where it was last year. So, is that good enough to beat Ohio State? We'll find out. And typically the Big Ten championship played indoors on that fast track favors the faster, more talented team, which objectively is Ohio State. But I think Indiana has a chance to keep that a lot closer than it was last year.
Well, you mentioned Mendoza. He'll be going up against Julian Sain in that game if those two teams get there unscathed. Do you think that game's going to end up being like a Heisman Trophy bowl, or is there somebody on the outside that might be able to take down these two Big Ten signal callers and win the award in a month?
Well, right now Ohio State's doing something that I get why they're doing it, but I don't recommend it if you want one of your players to win the Heisman, and that's promoting two players for the Heisman. They're promoting Julian Sain, and then they're promoting Jeremiah Smith. They could be promoting Carnell Tate, too. He's been that good as well at receiver. But I've just seen this before, that when you have two candidates from one team, they split the vote, and no one ends up winning from that squad. So, maybe they'll coalesce more around Julian, or Julian will do amazing things here against Michigan and in Indiana to possibly win that award. But I kind of like Mendoza more. I like Ty Simpson, Diego Pavia. These are bigger names right now in the sport than Julian Sain. I don't think people fully have appreciated what he's been able to do as a freshman quarterback this year for Ohio State, but part of that's because they haven't had the schedule and the showcase opportunities that some of these other teams have had, including Indiana. Alabama has had ranked opponent after ranked opponent. I was talking with Kalen about that yesterday. Diego Pavia, everybody knows who he is. He's a Johnny Manziel type of this year. I don't think that Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith, even though everyone knows who he is, really has the same type of profile. So at this point, guys, I would be surprised if an Ohio State player wins that award.
Wow. It's Julian Sayin right now, the favorite over at BetMGM. That's just so the disconnect between people who are in it and are voters or voter-like, and then you see the betting market think one thing with Julian Sayin of Ohio State. Very, very fascinating there from Adam Rittenberg. How about the game in the SEC, Florida and Ole Miss? Obviously, there's the big storyline of, hey, could Lane Kiffin end up going to be the head coach of the Gators? Ole Miss is expected to win by a couple of touchdowns from the people that do what we do. How do you see that game playing out? Any sort of weird distraction here on deck with Ole Miss? I know it's a revenge game after what happened last year down in Gainesville, but how do you see the game playing out on Saturday? And also, where do you think Lane Kiffin's going to be coaching in 2026?
Yeah, I think it would be certainly a bigger issue if the game was in Gainesville and not in Oxford. Certainly, I was talking to someone on Florida's staff today, and he said, hey, they've made no secret about the fact that they want Lane Kiffin here. And that's their target, absolutely. But it's a road, it's in Oxford, and Ole Miss has been really good there throughout the season. They're a better team than Florida. This would be a win that would eliminate Florida from bowl contention this year, and you have that revenge factor as well. So I think all those things play into Lane Kiffin's favor. Where does he coach next year? I still think it's probably going to be Florida or LSU. And not Ole Miss. I know a lot of people think he will go back to Ole Miss, and maybe he will, and he's got a great situation there. But I just think if you expand out over the long term, it's easier to win a national championship consistently at a place like LSU or Florida than it is at Ole Miss. I know it's a new day, but that's just how I look at it, and a lot of people look at it differently. But I think Ole Miss will have a fairly easy time with the Gators on Saturday.
Last question here, and this can be not have to hold you to it. It's not an answer that's in stone. You can also go back on this maybe in a week or 2 weeks from now. But who do you think, if you had to handicap it right now, who do you think is going to win the national title?
Yeah, I think it's probably Ohio State or Alabama. And I think if Alabama can get, again, its run game going on a more consistent basis, they've played such a great schedule, and they've overcome everybody except for the first game. So I certainly like what I've seen from the Tide. But it's hard to go against the Buckeyes. I mean, having seen them against Illinois and some of their other games, they had so much talent, guys, on that defense that just wasn't able to start last year because they had these longtime starters, like Jack Sawyer, like J.T. Tuimoloau, some guys in the back end who had been there, Denzel Burke, who had been there a long time. They have so much talent on that side of the ball that, as good as they are offensively and all the big plays that they make, they don't have to score 30, 35 points in many cases to win, and they know how to win now. They've been through a playoff gauntlet. So hard not to go with the Buckeyes, but certainly could see Alabama, Ole Miss, A&M. We haven't really talked about A&M. They're an explosive team that can attack defenses, and Mike Elko's done a fantastic job with the Aggies this year.
Awesome stuff. He is Adam Rittenberg over at ESPN, senior college football writer, Sirius XM College Sports Radio, on Twitter at ESPN Rittenberg. Adam, we thank you once again for hanging out with us this evening. Enjoy the games this week. Enjoy Tuscaloosa, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks,
Awesome
Adam.
Stuff there from Adam Rittenberg joining us here on BetMGM tonight. Brett, I find it incredibly interesting what he had to say about the Heisman Trophy, saying that he would be surprised if an Ohio State Buckeye won the award. An Ohio State Buckeye is the favorite at BetMGM, plus 160. And I think that's a very big thing for us on the betting side of it to kind of take and go ahead and digest. And like, hey, man, like the betting market, it could say one thing and try to project, but also the people who are in it, the people who are voters, they're not really feeling this Julian Sayin story or this Jeremiah Smith story. And maybe it's Mendoza or Simpson or even Pavia, who's at 25-1 right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Mendoza, man. I really do. I felt that way the entire time because Indiana is a feel-good story. And again, what we saw last week and that throw in the back of the end zone when Cooper just making that ridiculous, gravity-defying catch and get the foot down to the end zone, one of the greatest catches I've ever seen. We were asking Allen Robinson about it. And against his beloved team, no less. A guy that was a product of Penn State. He's like, yeah, man, that catch was sick. It is Mendoza's trophy to lose as long as Indiana remains competitive against Ohio State if they go toe-to-toe for the Big Ten title.